Wraith by William Toney. Chapter 13. The Price of Power. Aaron walked down the empty city streets, the echoes of his footsteps bouncing off the tall buildings. It was late, and the city had transformed into a realm of muted lights and silent corners. The weight of what he had just done pressed heavily on his chest. Marcus was gone, buried alive, but the victory didn't feel like a triumph. For days, Aaron had waged a war against Marcus's gang, picking them off one by one, their demise orchestrated with surgical precision. Each man had been forced to confront their darkest fears, their guilt, and their crimes until their minds or bodies broke. Aaron's abilities, fueled by Allistor's guidance, had made him untouchable, yet the question gnawed at him. What was he becoming? As he turned the corner toward his apartment, the cold wind bit at his skin. He stopped, his gaze drifting to the glowing city skyline. The night was quiet, too quiet, and he knew that Allistor was nearby before the devil even spoke. "You seem troubled, my boy." Allistor's smooth voice cut through the silence. Aaron didn't turn to look at him. "I did what had to be done." Allistor stepped into view, his polished shoes clicking softly against the pavement. His dapper suit was pristine, his golden eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Indeed you did, and quite beautifully, I might add. But you don't sound like a man celebrating his victory." Aaron's jaw tightened. "It doesn't feel like a victory. It feels empty." Allistor chuckled, a low, amused sound. "Ah, the weight of justice, or perhaps guilt. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." Aaron finally turned to face him, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and exhaustion. "What's your angle, Allistor? You said you wanted to help me, but you're enjoying this too much." The devil spread his hands, feigning innocence. "I've simply given you the tools to level the playing field. The choices, my dear Aaron, have always been yours." Aaron shook his head. "You make it sound like I had a choice, but every step I take feels like I'm being pushed further into your world." Allistor's smile faded, replaced by a look of calculated seriousness. "Let me tell you a truth that most mortals refuse to accept. Power always comes with a price. The question isn't whether you'll pay, it's whether you can live with the cost." Aaron stared at him, the weight of those words sinking in. "And what's the cost for me?" Allistor's grin returned, sharp and knowing. "That, my boy, remains to be seen." Aaron turned away, his hands clenched into fists. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low. "Not for me." The next day, Aaron found himself back at the hospital, sitting in a stiff plastic chair by Lilah's bedside. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. She was still unconscious, her face pale but peaceful. "I'm doing this for you," he whispered, reaching out to gently take her hand. "To make sure you're safe, to make sure no one else gets hurt." But even as he said the words, doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. Was he really doing this for her, or was it for himself? To feel powerful in a world that had once rendered him helpless. The door creaked open, and Aaron looked up to see Detective Marlowe stepping in. The older man's sharp eyes scanned the room before settling on Aaron. "We need to talk," Marlowe said, his tone firm but not unkind. Aaron nodded, standing and following the detective into the hallway. Marlowe leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You've been on my radar for weeks now, Aaron, ever since Lilah was found that night in the alley." Aaron's stomach tightened. "I barely survived. I waited for those thugs to leave, and I crawled away to get help. But I blacked out, and when I came to, I went back, and Lilah was gone." Marlowe narrowed his eyes at Aaron and said, "What doesn't make sense is, no one saw you there when the ambulance came and took Lilah. There's no record of you being treated for injuries after the assault. But it wouldn't be so bad if that was all. But then there's the thing with the gang that attacked you. That's the thing that really makes all this strange," Marlowe said, his gaze piercing. "People connected to Marcus's crew are dropping like flies. Accidents, disappearances, heart attacks. It's all too convenient." Aaron kept his face neutral. "You think I'm involved?" Marlowe shrugged. "I honestly don't believe that one man can take down an entire gang." Aaron felt a flicker of unease. "What are you getting at?" The detective leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've been around long enough to know when something is off. I don't know what's going on with you, Aaron, but whatever it is, It's dangerous. For everyone. Aaron's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. The only thing I'm concerned about is protecting Lilah and myself. Marlowe's eyes narrowed. Be careful, Aaron. Sometimes in trying to protect others, we end up destroying ourselves. That night, Aaron sat in his apartment, staring at the brass pot on the table in front of him. It felt like a lifetime ago when he had first opened it, unleashing Allistor into his life. He reached out to touch the pot, his fingers brushing against its cold surface. The room seemed to grow darker, the shadows deepening. What are you thinking about? Allistor's voice came from behind him. Aaron didn't flinch. Marlowe knows something's going on. He's watching me. Allistor appeared beside him, leaning casually against the table. Let him watch. He's just another mortal clinging to his fragile sense of order. Aaron turned to face him, his eyes hard. And what about Lilah? She's still lying in that hospital bed because of them. Allistor's expression softened, his tone almost sympathetic. And you've already ensured that those responsible won't hurt anyone else. But the world is full of predators, Aaron. Do you really think you can save everyone? Aaron stood, his fist clenched. Maybe not, but I can try. Allistor's smile returned, sly and knowing. Ah, such noble determination. But remember, my boy, the more you try to control, the more you risk losing. Aaron stared at him, his mind racing. The devil's words were both a warning and a challenge, and he couldn't shake the feeling that every decision he made was playing into Allistor's hands. But there was no turning back now. The darkness was his weapon, and he intended to wield it. The city remained alive with secrets and shadows, and Aaron was determined to confront them all. As he stood on the edge of his apartment's balcony, staring out at the sprawling maze of streets and buildings, he made a silent vow. Whatever the cost, he would finish what he started.